This, as you guys might remember, was my Skunkworks-ish reboot thing. It was kind of a hodgepodge of parts that we had. Yeah, I know, that's not, I know. Send your hate mail to nick@jace2cents.com. Anyway, moving forward, this is a Threadripper system. New Threadripper was announced. That makes this thing old, which means it's time for a new system. But only we're not going with a giant system like this. We're gonna put it in this thing. If you didn't see this review, check it out. It's one of our more recent videos. I'm also debating taking this 3090 out and putting it in my personal rig for my home system, which, by the way, my cables finally came from all the way from Australia. So we can finally get that Spectre 3 build done, but I gotta move this thing out of the way. I've already stolen my SSDs out of it. These are the parts that we are going to be using. I'm finally gonna be using a 12900K daily to see what kind of weird issues we have there. This is just the drives out of Skunkworks, which I can just pop in the new motherboard, which is an ROG Strix Z690i gaming Wi-Fi motherboard, which has a hamburger stacked of M.2s, which is pretty neat. This is the very first 3090 we received 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, when all of the parts came out. Actually, over 2 years ago, 3090 came. Yeah, wow.
Dang, 30 series is old.
This is a 2-year-old card now. Sucks. No, just kidding. Actually, no, it's not 2 years old until September. But anyway, I digress. It's the very first 3090 we received from EVGA. Got some sentimental value there. Revolt SFX 750 power supply. We will be putting the Phanteks Glacier 1 240 in this build because it's the one we showed you when we did the case review, and it absolutely will go well with the theme because of the way the cooler and stuff looks. But hey, look, I understand what you guys are saying right now. Another spoiled YouTuber getting to play with all his PC parts and put it together because, you know, their life is terrible and they're spoiled and such. Well, you know what you can do? You can build your very own computer coming up pretty soon because guess what? PC Building Simulator 2 was just announced and is about to launch. So if you're not aware, PC Building Simulator 2 is exactly like it sounds. You get to build computers in a simulator. PC Building Simulator 2 is now available for wishlist on PC at the Epic Games Store, and it's got a major graphical upgrade, so it's a huge upgrade over the first PC Building Simulator. It features an expanded and improved feature set, taking simulation to the next level. Now you can actually customize your workshop. Now for those of you that want to live stream PC Building Simulator 2, which I will be doing when the game launches, they have a completely royalty-free soundtrack built into the game now. So now you can stream and not have any sort of copyright or liability issues with the audio if you're streaming over on Twitch. And make sure you guys check out my stream of this game when we do it, which is twitch.tv/jace2cents. Shameless plug. So now you have new tools for enthusiast features such as thermal imaging, power monitoring, revamped thermal paste. Yeah, now you can make everyone cringe by just putting way too much thermal paste on there the right way. Custom VRM, RAM, GPU, water blocks, and more. So anyway, the game is gonna be launching soon. You guys can put it on your wish list for PC over on the Epic Games store, and make sure you guys check out my live stream when it's available. But hey, you know what? It's fun to just poke around in there and see exactly what certain cases and graphics cards and stuff look like put together, which could actually be a very useful tool for preparing your real life build. So check out the link down below and you guys can put it on your wish list today. So if you have not seen the review of this, you have to go and check it out. I'm not gonna be going over any of the features because we've already done all that. I will be expanding this obviously to the liquid cooled configuration because we've got a 240 liquid cooler right there that needs to be put in there. But I will be putting in pretty much maxing out the hardware capability of the power supply. So 12900K, right, with a 3090, that's gonna absolutely make the 750 watt be like, what are you doing? Stop it! But check this out. I wanna show you guys this motherboard real quick. This is nuts, because SFF, or small form factor, has definitely become way more popular than it's ever been, which means if people are using them as a main system, they lack, well, expandability, because you get one PCI Express slot, which obviously is gonna be used for your graphics card, and you have limited space on the board itself to be able to put any sort of M.2 drives. And what they used to do, they would put a slot on the back, and then it would be sandwiched between your motherboard and the motherboard tray, which is bad for M.2s because they would get way too hot and start to, the controller itself would really start to thermal throttle. Asus has created a, well, skyscraper of M.2 storage right here. So you got these right here. So once you take off the cover, there's another through screw right here you gotta loosen up. There's actually a screw down inside this hole you have to loosen up. You use a spudger or something to pop up this ribbon like that. Loosen this screw. There we go. So probably somewhat squeamish for new people, But there you go, that's how it comes apart. Take this guy. This does, of course, have the new captive system, which doesn't have a screw right there, so that just rotates over. Make sure that's keyed back into the socket right there, because we do want as much of this heat to make its way out of there as possible. So that metal piece doubles as a cooler for it, or at least a heat spreader for it, rather than a cooler. Tighten that one down. Double check, yep, that is socketed in all the way. Good. Now I can put the FPC cable, they call it, back on there. Boom, and then just rinse and repeat. But because of the height of that, you gotta be extra careful with your AIOs and such that they're gonna fit, which I have not verified, that AIO cooler in some way won't interfere with the really tall VRM coolers and this there. And then obviously with the RAM there, tubes, we'll see. And speaking of RAM, I forgot to mention, 32 gigs of 5600, DDR5 Capellix, 2 sticks. It's the smallest kit I have because they're 16 gigabyte sticks. So there's our hamburger. Check that out. So we got SSD on the bottom, SSD on the top, bowing slightly because of the fact that it's not double-sided, but that's fine. It's not hurting nothing. And yeah, that's fine. All right, so now our storage is installed, and I'm not taking off any of the protective sleeve on here yet until I get it all ready to go in the system. Now I need to put in my CPU, and we will go ahead and proceed in montage fashion. So I paused here to show you an issue. So you can see the plugs are bent as tight as they can be, and they come above this bracket. And that's an issue if you're gonna be using fans on top. So I've gotta take this big old card out of here now, and I've gotta put in I'm gonna put in a 3080 Ti Founders. But that's what you have to keep in mind, because with that sticking up, it will hit the fan if you're trying to put a fan there. If you put the rad there, there is some recessed portion here of where the fins are, and you could actually, well, it's not on there now, but you can actually get that void to be filled right there. The problem is with the graphics card being so tall and long right here, it fills the void where this tube has to go down there and then like pass over to the other side. You can see there's no room for that tube fitting to make it down in there. So although a nice gesture from Phanteks to be able to fit a big card, she just can't put it back together with fans or liquid cooler. And remember, I said if you're gonna use a big card like this, I would truly want to use fans there. You can't do that with the card that has, look at the extra space right here that this takes up. So if I use a standard size card, Nick, can you bring me that 3080 Ti, please? So although now I've just cut my VRAM in half by going from 24 to 12, I've now made it so that everything will fit right here. If you have any sort of card that goes higher than this divot right here, you're gonna have some serious issues with cabling and tubing and all that and making it fit. So that was an important point to stop the montage and educate you on this, so that this is why builds always bring out some sort of shortcoming. Always, every time. Build's done. It's the next day. You know how it goes with new builds. Got to get all the BIOS updated. Got to get the overclock set, because I did overclock it. Got my operating system up and running here from the Skunkworks system. So as you can see, well, you don't know what my desktop looked like, but I didn't have to change any of it. It is on Windows 11, and TPM and all that stuff was automatically already on because it's 12th gen. So it all booted up just fine as soon as we set the right bootloader to go. But anyways, temperature testing time. So I did change the fans on this cooler though to the Be Quiet fans, and you can tell because it's got the RGB lights in there. The reason why I did that is initial testing, and I'll go ahead and just tell you those numbers so we can compare, is my CPU was hitting about 93 degrees on the core with AI overclock enabled. So that means we have a 5.5 single core, 5.4 dual core, 5.3 all the way down to, I think it's 6 cores is up to 5.3, and then like 5.2 for the rest. E-cores are up to 3.9, or even 4.0, and then depending on the load, they might drop down if it's an AVX instruction set, whatever. So it is overclocked. With that, automatic voltage. So I didn't tune any of the voltages. I'll probably do a little bit of an undervolt, but already the voltages are pretty realistic in terms of where it's setting it. Now, if you guys hear those initial temps, wow, that is so hot, you're absolutely right. 12th gen's extremely hot. We are pulling 220 watts out of this CPU. Remember my video where I had to use an air conditioner to keep it realistically controlled temperature-wise just to hit 30,000? GPU was hitting about 80 C at full load with the factory fan curve, with the default fan curve in MSI Afterburner. Remember, default in MSI Afterburner is not default for the card's VBIOS. That's default for Afterburner's curve. Brought it down to about 77, 78, not a whole lot of difference. So that's why I opted to put the Be Quiet fans in here, which move more CFM, they're quieter and a higher RPM. So I have a bigger range of RPM to play with now to hopefully keep the temperatures even lower, even though those temps are completely within spec and even give me headroom before we start getting any throttling. I wanted something to compare against. So with those numbers out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and run Cinebench here. Check this out. 78C on the package, 79, 80, 81, 82. I do have KPX in here, by the way, Kingpin Extreme Thermal Paste. So I'm not using the paste that came with the cooler. But our cores are sitting here in the upper 70s to 80, 81. Hottest core so far is at 84. Is that core 6? Yeah, core 6 and core 7 are my hottest cores in this particular system. So that score right there was a 28,105. So as you can see, this is a very fast little computer. Like this is as strong as old school Threadripper stuff. And by old school, I mean the 2000 series, way faster than like the 1000 series Threadrippers. But we are down to 5.1 all core. It actually dropped 100 megahertz from when I first booted this up because of the fact that it reevaluated the cooler. ASUS motherboards have a cooler evaluation where it kind of monitors the temperatures based on the voltages it sets, and then it tries to dial it in to keep things under control, to dynamically adjust voltages based on the cooler and temp. So your temps are an indicator of your cooler, right? So if it goes, hey, the temps are pretty high, we should pull the voltage back. If we're pulling voltage back, we should pull the frequency back as well. That's why we lost 100 megahertz. And we are at 3.8 megahertz, or gigahertz, 3.8 megahertz. We just went back like 35 years. Yeah. Anyway, 3.8 gigahertz on the E-cores. 92C max package temp. Core 6 and 7 both hit 91 and 92. Cinebench is an AVX instruction. It is hot. I do have all of the Intel Turbo Timer limits removed. I do have AVX instruction offset set to 0, which means when AVX instructions are sensed, it does not downclock the CPU at all to try and keep temperatures under control. That's why I use Cinebench. It is extremely difficult on the system. However, we are not throttling whatsoever in these particular use cases with a small form factor. Wow, that's warm. The cooler's working. So once it hits 100 C is what it will start to dynamically keep an eye on the temps to try and thermal throttle. We might hit that on a hot day with this test just running and looping, which is not realistic. That was a 28,087. So you can see we're not dropping score. As soon as I hit it, temps will immediately drop down into there's 40s, there's 30s. So you can see right there with how fast the temperature dropped, that's specifically just the efficiency of getting heat out of the 12th gen into the block. We're 1.4 volts vid, which is the actual voltage for each core, and our V core was running at 1.394. Just to show you, under load, our VID is actually 1.186, and our VCore right here is 1.225. So you can see it's drooping like it should. That's why I don't think I can really reduce the voltages anymore, because I might start running into stability problems. The board is no longer pumping a stupid amount of voltage into the CPU. It's just now we need more cooling and a better heat transfer out of 12th gen. The GPU, that's the other side of this story here, because y'all know this graphics card needs to be able to get the heat out. I am running that default fan curve, like I said, in Afterburner. We are going to run TimeSpy Extreme on a loop. So the CPU package is currently at 44, 41, running at 5.2 gigahertz all core at the moment. So you can see why I'm perfectly fine with these voltages and stuff. Our GPU, look at this, 57, 58. I can tell you right now, this is rising much slower than it was before I put the Be Quiet fans in here. The downside is the Be Quiet fans are mapped to the motherboard, which is mapped to the CPU. And by the CPU not getting hot enough to ramp up those fans, we have to rely on the GPU heating up the CPU enough to trigger the fans to go up. So that's the downside about the way this software works, is that the motherboard itself does not communicate with the graphics card to find out what the temperatures are. So I can't set a GPU fan curve to ramp up the system fans. We talked about this when we did the case review. There is a little gap between the power supply and that wall that has the perforations in there that allow a flow-through fan like this to be able to not be fully obstructed. The problem is, you shove a lot of wires in there, so that takes up a lot of that space. Most of the fan noise we're hearing is actually that fan, which is right against that wall turning and causing a little bit of turbulence as the blade moves over those holes. So it's not the quietest setup, because where that fan is, like if NVIDIA had flipped it where the fan was on the other side pushing instead of pulling the air through, then it probably wouldn't be as noisy. But this noise is actually pretty acceptable. This is one of the quieter small form factor builds I've done in a long time. We just hit 72, I believe it was. Yeah, the fans aren't really ramping up because the CPU is not hot enough to ramp them up. That's the downside. I might have to play around with some third-party software to see if I can also get those fan curves to ramp up. I might have to play around with it inside the Armoury Crate software. There might be an option in there to allow me to look at the GPU temp to ramp them up. I want to see what the CPU test is like in here. 72, 67, oh yeah, look at this is fine. 84, 67, wow, it's all over the place. I never realized how much it actually jumps around in this test. I'm fine with these temps, really. This is like almost 20 C of headroom in a small form factor with a 12th gen 12900K. That's where we're gonna go ahead and end this video. This is how I'm planning on seeing how 12th gen feels before I even take my system home. Since my cables are finally here, I can finish that system. I wanna know what I'm getting myself into before I deal with any extra frustrations. This is also now the first Intel system that's running back at the office. We've been full AMD for like the last 2 years. So I'm curious to see if Team Blue is worth the recommendation once again for people to move to it. I don't think 12th gen is going to have a very long life. I think they're going to move on to 13th gen fairly quickly because we have such big competition taking place later this year with AMD dropping its AM4 socket and moving on to AM5 and going LGA, and who knows what they're going to bring with that architecture. I'm excited and can't wait to see. So anyways, thanks for watching this build. Small form factors, man. I am literally putting this next to my 65-inch BFGD. That stands for Big Format Gaming Display. You can change the F to whatever other word you want that may fit that sentence. Imagine this little guy next to a 65-inch display. In fact, this is what it looks like. And now that I've just completely showed compensation, we'll go ahead and end this video.